we know how to line up.
If you don't talk,
Okay.
AG's office or?
no,
Where you with?
he's not here. Hold on, he's not here yet, so let's not squish, because we're still under the pandemic.
That's fair.
When they come,
That's fair.
we'll squish.
Will it just
Gotta keep it real.
Truly, let's be honest with that. It's not.
What a good looking group.
Oh, you can give me compliments this morning. All right.
How you doing, man? I got
How are you?
I got a letter to show you. I got a letter to show you.
Hello.
How are you?
Nice to see you.
Let's do this. Why don't you come?
How you doing?
So we do a little height thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and then, obviously, perfecto. Why don't you move up because you're tall? And then we'll get you one in.
Good morning.
And then, if you can just slide in there. That way I know the speakers. These are going to be the three speakers.
Yeah.
Okay,
You wanna
and
move
Wes,
back?
where are you?
Yeah.
Wes,
I assume I shouldn't be behind. No, you shouldn't.
yeah, no.
What's up there?
You need to come in.
Perfect. And then run out over, yes, and just a little bit down, over a little bit, over a little bit. Perfect. And then we can actually do this. This is gonna fall. Okay. No one's in the way of the sign? Okay, all good?
See the camera? Camera can see us.
All hearts and minds are clear.
Okay, let me just grab my notes real quick. You're on the mask. You're free to do what you feel, comfortable, and also makes you safe. Okay. This is whose is this? Can we put this just elsewhere? It can definitely coexist.
Put it over.
Perfect. Who you with, Jacob? WAMU, they're always taking up the space there. Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you to everyone who could join us today. I know that we had planned on being outside, and sure enough, the forecast for Thursday was a little mixed, so we decided to be, safe rather than sorry, and we've come inside. So thank you for being here. First, I'd like to thank all of our guests who are behind us, who care deeply about the environment and are also deeply concerned about environmental justice, which in a nutshell means that the history of our country is such that whenever there was trash to be disposed or other things that could hurt people, that always went to areas where folks had the least amount of power. And that tended to be places where folks were less well off, and yes, black and brown communities. And so in a real way, environmental justice is an imperative that for too long has not been seriously followed. We are going to adhere to that, and that's what we're doing today, and that's what we've done our entire tenure. Let me first introduce you to the three individuals behind me who will also be speaking. They're just going to introduce themselves, and then I'll come right back. So why don't we start with Mr. Ali. Just introduce Madam Ali, sorry.
Akoshua Ali, President of the NAACP Washington, D.C. branch and a Ward 7 resident.
Thank you. My apologies for that. Matt.
Good afternoon, Matthew Gravatt. I'm the chair of the DC chapter of the Sierra Club and a Ward 6 resident.
And Dennis.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dennis Chestnut. I am a member of the Ward 7 Resilience Hub Community Committee and a Ward 7 resident.
Thank you, Dennis. With me also to my left is my colleague, Wesley Rosenfeld. Wesley is an exceptional lawyer. He's in our environmental group that works out of a division called the Public Advocacy Division. Wesley has been, along with his team members, really the fuel behind much of our work. To the extent later that there are questions of a technical nature, you better believe I'm going to ask Wesley to answer them. So Wesley, you can just introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wesley Rosenfeld. I'm an Assistant Attorney General here within the Social Justice section.
Thank you, Wesley.
You're
All right. Let me just note the presence of, or the lack of presence of, two people who, just are working today and couldn't make it. And that is the Department of Energy and Environment Director, Tommy Wells, who's been a strong partner throughout my tenure as Attorney General. He's worked really well and really hard on environmental issues, and I very much appreciate his collaboration. In addition to Tommy, his general counsel, my former law partner, David Dickman, is an outstanding lawyer who also has teamed well with the Office of Attorney General. Okay, as the first independent elected Attorney General, our office has leaned into our public interest mission. A key part of these efforts has included protecting our environment to create cleaner, safer, and healthier futures for DC families. Over the past nearly 80 years, 8 years, that's 2 terms, we've worked to fight the climate crisis, enforce DC's environmental protection laws, and ensure that every district resident has access to clean water and air. Since 2014, actually it's 2015 is when I started, we've recovered over $60 million, and we've also sought and won many, many, many injunctive relief. Injunctive relief just means that companies that we've sued have agreed to no longer pollute, and usually they've agreed to provide us with information that they're following through on their promise. This includes victories in a wide range of cases. Legal actions that include recovering over $50 million from Monsanto for their role in the spread of toxic PCB chemicals in the district's waters and other natural resources, securing $4.75 million in penalties, including $3.2 million for lead violations from Ward 4 landlords over housing code violations. Obviously, a big issue in the city today is housing and the department, DC Housing Authority. That's another thing that we might talk about later. Back to that Ward 4 settlement, it included issues related to mold, leaks, infestations, fire safety violations, and toxic lead. We've also recovered $2.5 million from a power plant that was discharging oil right into the Potomac River. We also recovered $350,000 as a penalty from an owner whose property was leaking toxic used oil in Ward 5. We've secured over $400,000 from a developer for renovating at least 26 homes across the district without taking legally required precautions to protect against possible lead exposure and environmental contaminations. And if you've been watching, we've been razor focused on PEPCO for systematically mishandling the district's solar energy programs and overcharging thousands of DC households on their electric bills. Consumer Protection 101, don't pay for anything that you have not carefully scrutinized. Please look at your bills. And of course, as I noted at the outset, we work incredibly closely with the Department of Energy and Environment, Tommy Wells, Dave Dickman, to coordinate and implement the Anacostia River cleanup efforts. And we investigate and assess damages to these natural resources. We have a strong track record of protecting district residents from environmental harms, and we're dedicated to continuing to do all we can to protect the earth and the district's environment in the short run and in the long term. Importantly, we know that environmental justice is intertwined with racial justice and just flat out fairness. As all too often, Black, brown, and indigenous communities are forced to bear the brunt of pollution, toxic sites, and contaminated water supplies. Think Flint, Michigan, Jackson, Mississippi. Who got hurt? Obviously, that's grave injustice, and clearly it's systematic. At the start of the environmental justice movement, Walter Fauntroy, the great congressional delegate, our first congressional delegate, called for a federal study on whether communities of color were disproportionately impacted by hazardous, wasteful landfills. The study found that 3/4 of the hazardous waste landfill sites in 8 southeastern states were located in mostly low-income Black and brown communities. DC was not included in that study. Congress decided who would be studied and not. They chose not to study DC. As we work to mitigate the increasingly devastating impacts of climate change, we must recognize and act to address the fact that the people who most commonly live and work in the most polluted parts of our communities are more likely to be low-income people of color. These communities have been fighting the systematic injustice and the subsequent devastating health impacts for generations. We see this every day in our lawsuits, such as when the owner of a Ward 7 apartment building exposed residents to toxic lead-based paint, or the manager of a Ward 8 apartment building discharged polluted water into the storm sewer system. We must always work to ensure that outcomes and solutions are approached through the lens of understanding who is disproportionately impacted and why. I'm proud to announce today that we're filing a new lawsuit, the first state or similar jurisdiction to file a lawsuit against Velsicol, a major chemical manufacturer, for contaminating local waterways and natural resources with a toxin, cancer-causing chemical called chlordane. For decades, Velsicol poisoned our community with chlordane, a pesticide used to kill insects, knowing it caused severe health problems. Let me just state that again. They knew that the pesticides that they were selling as a cure to ants and roaches and things like that would cause health problems, yet they marketed and sold them. No later than 1959, Velsicol knew chlordane could cause cancer and other health problems. Rather than halt its sales and share this information with the public, Velsicol embarked on a years-long campaign of the familiar misinformation and deception to continue profiting from selling its products, including throughout the District of Columbia. This campaign included targeted advertisements for household use of its dangerous products long after Velsicol knew about their toxic effects. I urge the media to go to our website. We're going to put up on our website some of the ads that they used back in the day. Incredibly clever, never said warning, could cause harm to your health. Even after Velsicol executives were handed a felony indictment and paid a criminal fine for engaging in a cover-up and conspiring to defraud the U.S. government by withholding material information about chlordane's dangers to human health, they continued to sell this dangerous chemical in the District of Columbia. Despite it being decades since chlordane was removed from the market, they were removed from the market in 1988, chlordane persists in our environment and continues to pose a danger to residents. That's the way dangerous chemicals work. They don't just go away if you put water on them. They stay in the earth and they hurt people, and people don't even know what's making them sick. Velsicol has showed a remarkable, stunning, I would call it, disdain and disregard for the health and well-being of district residents, and their actions had a particularly harmful impact on poor and Black and brown and senior community members who in particular relied on subsistence fishing and fish along the Potomac and Anacostia rivers. It is my sincere hope and that of my colleagues, and boy, does the Office of Attorney General have talented people, that this suit today sends a clear message to any other company that if they pollute our natural resources and put residents' lives at risk, the Office of Attorney General will use every tool available to us to bring them to justice and hold them accountable. What we found is that when companies lie and mislead for money, the best way to hold them accountable is for money. That's what they care about. That's what makes them hurt. That's what we're going to do in this lawsuit. I'm confident that the next Attorney General will build on the efforts of my colleagues here at the Office of Attorney General and continue the fight for cleaner, safer, healthier futures for DC families. I want to thank each of you for being here today. I know there's a lot of news today. You could certainly be elsewhere. Next, we're going to hear from those standing with me, the individuals who just introduced themselves, Ms. Ali and the others, about the impact of this matter as well as other environmental matters in the communities in which they work and advocate for every day. So, Ms. Ali, the mic is yours.
Thank you. So thank you again to the Office of Attorney General Carl Racine and his leadership on this. As a fighter for environmental justice, we are particularly honored to stand with him. As he's mentioned, my name is Akoshua Ali. I am the president of the NAACP Washington, D.C. branch. I'm a D.C. native and I'm a Ward 7 resident. So particularly as someone who lives east of the river, who frequents the Anacostia River, Anacostia Park, who has a deep connection to the importance of healthy communities, clean water, and wildlife. This is something that is of particular importance to me, my family, and as an example, many residents within the District of Columbia that as a basic requirement should have access to clean water, clean air, and a right to healthy and whole living. I'm proud to represent a family of environmental justice activists committed to moving our most vulnerable communities from surviving to thriving. For over 113 years, the NAACP has been a champion for the fight for racial justice as the nation's oldest and largest civil rights organization. The NAACP advocates to advance racial equity and environmental justice through political, educational, and economic empowerment. The NAACP mobilizes over 3 million members in 2,000 units nationwide, which fight for environmental justice and health equity. The NAACP here in Washington, D.C., we represent over 20,000 members, stakeholders, and partners that are voting residents across all 8 wards of the District of Columbia. The NAACP is a fierce advocate for transformative solutions to ensure that Black and brown lives are safe, healthy, thriving, and valued in all spaces. Environmental justice is a civil rights issue. The NAACP works to ensure communities of color have access to clean water, clean air, and natural resources clear of pollutants. But not all residents in the district are equally impacted. Race, class, income, healthcare, and privilege all influence health impacts of environmental toxins. The long-term impacts of this chemical manufacturer releasing these toxic cancer-causing chemicals into the Anacostia has had disproportionate health impacts on lower-income Black residents in D.C. So today, the NAACP is proud to stand with Attorney General Carl Racine to emphasize that polluting our water with toxic cancer-causing chemicals and poisoning our wildlife will not be tolerated. Environmental toxins have a financial and health impact to the residents of the district, and we owe it to our communities to ensure companies that pollute our rivers and natural resources are held accountable. We expect this to only be the beginning, and we hope that the next Attorney General will continue to build upon this as setting precedent, because we have many more environmental injustices that are impacting our community. So we need to have our eyes and ears attuned to be a voice to ensure that our communities that are most vulnerable are protected and advocated for. Thank you all. Peace and power.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ali, for those passionate and factual remarks. We're going to go now to Matt Gravatt.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Attorney General Racine. My name is Matthew Gravatt. I'm the chair of the DC chapter of the Sierra Club. Sierra Club is the nation's oldest and largest environmental organization with chapters all across the country, including right here in the District of Columbia. And on behalf of our many thousands of members and supporters in DC, it's an honor to be here today with Attorney General Racine and with the distinguished leaders and partners at this event. Attorney General Racine, thank you for your leadership. Thanks for standing up for the people of the district, for fighting for us, and for your focus on holding polluters accountable, and for centering equity and environmental justice in your work. We're proud to stand with the Attorney General today as he takes on a polluting corporation that's poisoned DC's waterways with toxic, cancer-causing chemicals for decades. Today, DC takes another step to address historic injustice that's harmed our environment, our rivers, and our communities. And when we look at our history and our present, we know that toxic pollution too often disproportionately and disparately impacts communities of color and low-income families. We know that pollution is a systemic injustice that harms lives and livelihoods, a plague that's fouled our rivers and our environment across generations. For far too long, communities here in DC have been witness to the dire consequences of pollution, especially our most vulnerable residents, those disproportionately bearing the burden of the climate crisis and facing the health impacts of dirty air or water. We're pleased to see that tide is turning, along with concrete measures like this one being taken to ensure that we never go back to where we've been. We know that many older residents grew up swimming in the Anacostia River, but years of unmitigated and uncontrolled pollution contaminated those waters so badly that not even fish could survive. And today, thanks to action, accountability, lawsuits like this one, that tide is turning. The Anacostia is beginning to thrive, and there's real hope that in the very near future, it will be swimmable again. And we share that hope. Today, DC is making, again, clear that no polluter is above the law. And for nearly 8 years, the Attorney General, the Office of the Attorney General, has prioritized protecting DC residents from the pollution, from its harms, and using every tool in the toolbox to enforce those protections, tackle the climate crisis, and ensure that district residents have access to clean water, to clean air, no matter their neighborhood or where they live. Attorney General Racine has taken on oil and gas companies for misleading consumers about global warming. He's held bad actors to account for toxic lead pollution that disproportionately harms children. And he's been in the trenches, working to advance smart policy and leveraging the power of the law to protect our air and water and wildlife here in DC. Sierra Club's committed to a more sustainable, equitable, and just DC for everyone, and we want to ensure that DC is a safe place to live, to work, and to play. We're working to tackle the climate crisis, which is impacting communities here, now, extreme heat, extreme weather. And Attorney General Racine knows that protecting our environment, tackling polluters, tackling the climate crisis, and holding them accountable for cancer-causing toxic chemicals that are flowing into our rivers and our air is advancing environmental and racial justice. He showed us again here today that no polluter in DC is above the law. We're grateful for the Attorney General, to the staff and the Office of the Attorney General for their unflinching work to combat the climate crisis, confront environmental injustice, and fight for DC's most vulnerable residents. We applaud this work to hold polluters accountable and to protect the health of DC's human and natural environment. His leadership is a model, and it must serve as a model for future administrations and attorneys general here in DC and across the country. This is bold action today, and throughout his tenure, we've seen bold action. We hope that that's continued to be reflected across DC and the country. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Thanks.
Okay, last, of course, but not least, Dennis.
So good afternoon again to everyone, and to echo Attorney General Racine, thank you very much for being here today to be able to share this information with the community and with the public. Again, my name is Dennis Chestnut. I'm the former founding executive director of Groundwork Anacostia River, DC, an organization that laid the example for a lot of the work that we're seeing taking place now, especially as it relates to the cleanup of the Anacostia River. I'm a lifetime resident of Ward 7. As a matter of fact, still reside in the same neighborhood where I grew up. So I'm very familiar with the natural environment of that community, and I've watched it over the years and how the impacts of what's been done to it has taken place. I am the proud grandfather of 15 grandchildren, and now two great-grands. And it's because of them that they have been the wind beneath my wings for continuing to engage in this work and to push these efforts forward. Today's action by A.G. Racine is a critical step toward holding those who pollute our natural resources accountable. Environmental justice requires a full circle investment to clean up polluted areas and restore health of our river and our community. We appreciate Attorney General Racine's strong commitment to fighting for our environment and hope his efforts serve as a warning to anyone who might threaten DC residents' health and safety. I worked with a group of high school students who are in an internship program, and introducing them to the construction industry and things related to that. And we were having a discussion the other day, and I told them I was going to be participating in this press conference. And I mentioned chlordane, the pollutant that we were discussing. So of course they asked me, had a lot of questions about it. And I just simply told them to think about something that one drop of that in a swimming pool would pollute and contaminate that entire swimming pool. That's the kinds of things that we're dealing with, and why it's so important to have true leaders like Attorney General Racine, who has really taken the fight to those who've been the perpetrators of this kind of pollution to our environment. So I'm very grateful to your counsel, to Attorney General Racine for the work that you've carried forward. I mean, we've been pushing, and you've taken the ball and moved it forward, so to speak. So again, thank you very much for being here today, and I look forward to seeing this work go forward. Thank you.
Excellent, Dennis. Look, I think Dennis, in a way, said it all. He cited his grandkids and his great-grandkids. That's what protecting the environment ultimately is all about. It's about making sure that those who come behind us have the benefit that we've had of enjoying Mother Earth. Thank you very much, Dennis. Since there are other people behind me, they're not going to talk, but I do think they should introduce themselves. They did come down here, and I know they work in their own yard, if you will, to make sure that their community is safe. So, Jeanette, why don't you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Manning. I'm Commissioner for ASC 5C of the chair. I don't know why he likes to call me Jeanette. Maybe I look like one. But I want to thank the Office of Attorney General, especially Carl Racine, for the excellent work he has done without waiver to represent the District of Columbia in this matter. It's so important. I am a Ward 5 resident, lifelong member as well, so I do understand all of this. I had a mother to succumb to breast cancer, and I know it was environmental. So thank you again.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And politicians should just stick with the last name. Okay, let's get the river keepers here.
My pleasure. Thank you for your leadership. My name's Trey Sherrod. I am the river keeper for Anacostia River Keeper. Our mission is to clean up, restore, and protect the Anacostia River for everybody who lives, works, and plays in the watershed. And while we're getting close to swimmable, toxics, and getting this river safe to actually eat all the fish that people might catch, especially those really at-risk communities, subsistence angling on the river, is a huge deal, and it's still far away, but work like this is getting us a lot closer, a lot faster, and it's an impressive model for other groups to follow.
Thank you, brother. Robert, come on up.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Robert Vincent Branham. I'm Commissioner 5E08. I'm on the Executive Committee of the DC branch of the NAACP, and I'm pleased to stand with Attorney General Racine and my branch president, Ms. Ali, for this effort. And Attorney General Racine has been a model Attorney General for states and a violent champion for district leaders, residents, and I'm pleased to stand here and support his efforts on the environment and civil rights.
All right, William, why don't you quickly introduce yourself?
Bill Washburn, and I'm a member of the Environmental and Climate Justice Committee, NAACP DC chapter, and I'm proud to stand here along with my chapter president, who, as you see, is a fierce advocate for environmental justice and dealing with these challenges. I'm also a longtime resident of Ward 8.
I love the adjective long-time resident. We're still here, contributing to the community.
Thank you very much. My name is Susan Shore, and I'm a colleague of Matt's. I'm the chair of the Zero Waste Committee at the Sierra Club, and we are working on another kind of pollution, plastic pollution, which is also impacting the Anacostia River. Thank you very much for your leadership.
Thank you for joining. Okay, you met Wesley earlier. Let me just say one thing before we go to Q&A. There's been some praise heaped here. Trust me on this. The work gets done by the professionals at the Office of Attorney General every day. Lawyers and folks who didn't waste their money on law school. With that, happy to take questions. Okay, do you want to help me with, why don't you stand up and introduce yourself and ask the question?
Sorry, Kyle Swenson from the Washington Post. I had two quick ones. I wonder, are there particular products that this chemical was in that were marketed?
Sure.
And also, the number two would be, could you give us a little narrative of how this got to this point? Were there complaints that came to the Attorney General's office? Was there a cancer cluster that was investigated that led to this point? And how we got from there to here?
Those are excellent questions. I'll take it on, and Wes, feel free to supplement. Okay, I'll be really quick. So Velsicol was a producer of both consumer and commercial pesticides. Look, no one likes ants, roaches, and the like around their home. And sometimes you don't like to get bit by mosquitoes and other bugs. The problem is not that you don't like those things, it's how you choose to market goods that would mitigate the harm caused by those insects and bugs. So residential use, commercial use. The problem, the company knew in 1958 that their product caused cancer. They kept marketing it until 30 years later when the EPA shut it down. Shut it down means banned the marketing of the product. As to how we came here, I mentioned earlier that teaming with the Department of the Energy and Environment, and again, Director Wells, we are working really hard. I have to say, this is uncovered. Please cover this story about the work that's being done to clean up the Anacostia by virtue of partnership between the Department of Energy and Environment and the Office of Attorney General. We're trying to get the pollutants of that waterway to give us, to pay for the damage that they caused. In the midst of doing that work, we uncovered many, many other incidences where companies with knowledge put their product that hurt people and the earth onto people and the earth. This was one of those chemicals, and Velsicol was one of those companies. When we find that, we'll do the work, we'll draft the complaint, and you watch. We'll make them pay. Next question. Hold on. Wes, anything? Okay.
Hey, Bruce Lachine from WUSA 9. I imagine it's a long shot, but do you have any specific victims who believe that they can tie their cancers to exposure to chlorine?
You know, that's a great question. I really appreciate your answering that. And if you look at it from the standpoint of racial justice and, you know, environmental justice, what do folks say oftentimes when you see a lower mortality rate amongst people of color and indigenous communities? They blame the very people who are dying sooner than other people. That's the narrative that is replayed, right, by the mainstream over and over and over again. So tying this to a specific individual is challenging. I think it's doable. I think it's worth the work of you know, honestly getting permission and going through the autopsies and going through the etymology and the anthropological as to where people lived and what they did, how they ate, did they fish. I think that's worth the work. Jacqueline is saying it sure is. Okay, and look, if you want to join us in an appropriate way to do that work, let's do the work. Because people aren't dying early just because of their own conduct. It's often, right, nature versus nurture. It's nature. And a lot of times people don't have a choice around their nature. Please.
Yeah, just to add on to what the AG said, this is also about a public resource. This is your river and your stream. And how, in a year after EPA banned the product, the district issued a fishing advisory telling people not to eat certain fish because it had too much chlorine within their fish tissue. So for decades, district residents were told not to eat this fish, and that is a gigantic damage to the residents within the district.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I was just looking at some of the ads, not on your website, but on YouTube. And it looked like Ortho actually marketed chlorine. That would have been produced by Vesicol. And in addition to that, it looked like a lot of people used it for termites. So is there the possibility that people may still have homes that are contaminated with this product?
Our investigation continues, both as to additional defendants and with respect to your question, I think I'm going to defer to Wes to see whether we can supplement that.
Yeah, we believe the product has been applied to district homes. I can't tell you if any particular homes are contaminated. As the AG said, we're going to continue to look into that. But areas in the district have been contaminated by chlordane, such as at Poplar Point on the east side of the river.
And in terms of Ortho, would that have been sold by Vesicol to Ortho? Because isn't that a different company?
Vesicol was the sole manufacturer of chlordane, and they produced their own products, and they also sold to third-party manufacturers who reformulated the chemical into other products.
Thanks, Wes. Let me go just skip to the back. Sometimes the back has the best question. And then you're next. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm from the Washington Foreigner. I'm just wondering, you mentioned that some of this chemical is still around today. Sorry, your name, please. Oh, I'm Kayla.
Hi, Kayla.
Are there specific places in the river? You mentioned Poplar Point. Are there other spots that we know this chemical is still kind of lurking?
Yeah, so as the AG was mentioning, DOE has conducted a comprehensive investigation of contaminated sediments in the river. And there are specific areas within the river that have chlordane that pose an unacceptable risk to human health and the environment. And also, given that fish, don't just stay in one part of the river, this is not just an Anacostia issue, this is a district-wide issue impacting all of the rivers and streams.
Do you know where some of those hotspots are? Can you describe those areas?
Yes, there's a lot of information through DOE studies showing maps of where the contamination was found in sediment in the Anacostia.
And let's do this, Kayla. We'll invite you to reach out to our communications team led by Abby McDonough. You want to come in, sit down. Wesley will sit down with you and we'll give you an overview of the extraordinary work that's been done by the partnership between the Office of Attorney General and DOE. I have to say that Tommy Wells, again, has been an exceptional partner, but he got upset, really upset a couple years ago when we took Wes from the DOE. But we're all rowing in the same direction for the same team. Other questions? Can you stand up for a second? Thanks.
Mike Murillo at WTOP. Question is kind of follow up on her. So are these recent tests that came back with this chemical? Are we talking about older tests? Just kind of give us a timeline there.
So the issue of chloridane impacting the district has been studied for more than 30 years. I mentioned the fishing advisory in 1989. There were samples of fish tissue taken from the mid-'80s and on to form the basis of that fishing advisory. But in terms of the contaminated sediments in the Anacostia, those are samples that have been taken within the past 5 to 7 years.
Okay, so you can't say like this year, but within the last 5 years. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
How you doing, sir?
Hey, how you doing? Drew Costley with the Associated Press. Can you just talk more about the legal strategy here? This is really actually two questions. The first question is like proving any sort of like actual health impact part of the legal strategy? It looks like it's not. I just want to confirm that. And then the second is, can you just talk about the legal strategy of going after polluters in order to like address environmental harm? You touched on that a little bit, but
Sure. I think you asked an excellent question around the nature of the legal claim that we've posed and whether it's kind of a personal injury claim where we're representing an individual who may have gotten sick or worse, and died of cancer. We're not doing the latter. We're actually representing the public interest of the District of Columbia. And what we're saying is that a company that sold a product, did a lot of environmental harm, marketed it as being safe and effective and a net benefit, even though it knew well the dangers it could cause. Not only is that just a bad lie, but that's a lie that hurt people generationally and our natural resources. Go back to the Monsanto suit. If you want to have an interesting exercise, mark the date of our complaint. Legal complaint filed in court, Monsanto. Mark the date of the settlement. Those dates were not far away from each other. When companies are held to account, you know what they try to do? They try as best they can to resolve the matter as soon as possible. I can't predict what's going to happen here, and we're happy to go to trial. We prepare for trial, but I wouldn't be surprised if the company wants to seek a resolution. If it's fair to the District of Columbia, we're game. If it's not, as they say, see you in court.
And just to square that, so, and then those, like, money that you get from those settlements are then, can you talk about how they...
Sure, it's a great question. So Monsanto, again, go to Monsanto. Use that as a model. There it goes. Thank you very much for pointing that out. Watch my memory at work. $52 million recovered. in the Monsanto case, correct me if I'm wrong, Wes, 30 million went to the Department of Energy and the Environment for its work to not only clean up the Anacostia, but the other stuff that they do for our grandkids and our great-grandkids. Some went to the Treasury. It's up to you to go find out how that was used, hopefully well. That's where the money goes.
I
Please.
have an off-topic question. My name is Sierra Fox. I'm a reporter at Fox 5 DC. What are your thoughts on Chris Geldar, former DC Deputy Mayor of Public Safety and Justice, resigning after being charged with assault and battery in Arlington, Virginia, and living outside the district?
So I would love to just focus on the environment, but I get that we are in America. And you asked a question, and my job as an elected official is to answer it. And so I will. I was taught to never kick anyone when they're down. And I feel for Mr. Geldard on a personal level because he obviously is down right now. So my remarks will not be about kicking Mr. Geldard personally. My remarks are going to be about the job that he did as the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, I think is what it's called. Mr. Geldard oversaw 2 failed agencies. The Department of Corrections, you remember the reporting about that? Kind of went away in the news. Go back and follow that story. What was found when the U.S. Marshals went and conducted an unannounced search and audit, it's a plethora of violations of law, to the point where the Office of Attorney General had to recuse itself from the Department of Corrections. As a lawyer, you never want to leave a client alone, but sometimes there are ethical responsibilities that require it. That's agency number 1 under Mr. Geldard. Agency number 2, the Department of Forensic Services. They're not accredited anymore. They're a failed agency. And so I think that the failure of those 2 agencies speak of leadership that could have been replaced a long time ago based on good old-fashioned performance.
Do you believe he was fit for the role in the first place?
No.
Why or why not?
No. If you're going to run or be the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, you should have a track record around the issues involved in that jurisdiction. The record shows that he did not. I think what happens a lot in this government is that loyalty matters more than expertise and competence.
Who's responsible for that?
Ultimately,
Thank you.
I think you've answered your own question. Period.
Thank you, everyone.
Good questions. Thank you.